Hello, and this is a video all about mixing down. You'll notice it's very different to the last project because I've actually bus stemmed all the channels into stems or auxiliaries or buses, whatever you want to call them. That's when you put, say, multiple channels through one stack, or you route them out by soloing them, various ways. But yeah, so the reason I do this is because when I get to a point in a track where I feel like it's reached its potential, I can't really do much more to make it that much better, and I'm really happy with how everything is. It's one way, again, as I said earlier in the other video, the way to commit to audio, and then you're not tempted to be getting too deep down the rabbit hole of wanting to mess around with things or change things. So when it's like this, I feel like you view it in a different way, and you use your ears more rather than looking at all the synths or all the plugins and things. So yeah, I'll just quickly go through this one. So the kick is exactly the same as it was before because it's committed to audio, and it's just got the fades on as I showed you before. And if you notice, a lot of these initially when they came in, they were pretty much like that. So they are all the full stems, and what I've done is I've edited them, I've cut them down. You can see, especially in areas like this, where it works really well because you 100% know there's no sound going in there. So all the release, all the delays, reverbs, or any other artifacts that could be in the track, that it's definitely not going to be there. And you can also manipulate these audio clips differently and process them differently to get a desired sort of mix down rather than having 60 channels or whatever it was, 50, 60. So this is one thing I do. I don't always do this, it's just I found that with a lot of the tracks that I'm really pleased with, and I get to they might even get signed from a demo version, and then I go back to them and do this to them because I feel like you can just add those extra little bits of toppings, a bit of spice on top, So yeah, so the kicks and then the bass line, I've not really done that much to. The only thing I have done on that one is put an overdrive. Again, just a bit of for a bit of saturation. I've just put on like a drive of 3 with an output of -3. That's just to give it a bit more of a bite. I'll just play that and turn that off. So again, it gives a slightly bit more perceived loudness, and then I've put a EQ3 on just to tidy it up a little bit. But I've also put in a couple of dynamic areas, which I didn't use in the end. But I tried to mirror what I did on the other one, but I must have found that it doesn't really work. I don't really need it on those areas. That's how it would have been, but I've probably decided I don't need that. So, these are the things I always do as well when I'm mixing down, is just make sure that I A and B between like all the plugins, and it's a good way of, instead of having a full channel strip with loads of different plugins on, I like to think, right, leave it raw, and I'm not going to mess around with it too much. So the drums, let's see what I've put on those. I've just put a channel EQ, just top and tailed it, just not really doing that much because I know that it was very clean before, and then I just put a limiter on just to catch the very high transients on there. So if you can just see, the gain reduction is like around 1.2. There we go. That's just to reduce the input to the final master chain. So, and then on the lead stems, one thing I have noticed, I don't know what that's there for, just one thing I have noticed I do quite a bit is the fades, these fades, just so that it, that especially if it's like a held string or a sound like a stem that comes in filtered, it's just an extra precaution that there's no sound coming in early on that's not needed, or especially as well with the, sometimes the audio clips can click. So it's really good to just sort of make sure you've got, like, you can see, as you can see on this one here, there's just a small, just on the end, just to take away those clicks, which you sometimes get. But yeah, sometimes if they're all the same, you can just highlight them all and then just change it on the side here. We'll just put like one or two depending on what you need. So the drums, and then the lead stem. The lead stems, it's really good to do this because I sometimes create the track and then don't think about EQing it fully until later on, until I get to this stage. So like on these, I've just, I've in the mix, I've thought they're not bright enough, so I've just brought it up around here, around sort of 1.3 thousand, and then just shelved it up a little bit just to give it that area it was lacking before. So the vocals, looking at the vocals, what I've done is I've just taken the very top end off and below 200, and again I put a Shadow Hills on like I did on the original master bus, and then just put these onto steel like that. Yeah, that's just that again, just to give it more flavour, just add doubling up. I just felt it could do with it, and then just, again, taking the as I said, taking that bit off. The effects stems, again, just taking out the lower ends if there's any, unwanted clicks, pops, rumbles, or anything like that. And then the big leads, let's have a look at these ones. What I've done on the big leads is, so on this one, you can see that I felt like it needed to reduce in that area there. It's let's have a look. Let me do this. See if it works. So as you can see, and there and around there 298. I just felt like I could, in the mix, I could really hear it coming through that area, and I felt like I had to lower the volume of the initial leads down, whereas I wanted more volume of it, but I didn't want it to be as mid-bodied. So what I did, I also put on a dynamic but an upward gain on the actual sides. So I went into the node on this high shelf, and then I just changed it here onto the sides from stereo, because I just wanted to give it a bit more of that wider, a wider feel. Like that's, with it being the prominent lead in the track, when it drops, I wanted it to, I wanted that to be sort of the thing that is in a club really loud, and one way of getting that to come across as louder is make it wider, but still have the the mono or mid signal as powerful. The reason I've used the dynamic EQ over using just, say, a high shelf is this actually works with the volume of the lead. As it's playing, you'll see that it moves. So instead of it being just going, just being open all the time, it actually moves with the notes. So as the volume comes down, it doesn't stay up. So the tail ends aren't really loud, but they're still, they're naturally sort of moving down with it, if that makes sense. So, and especially with the tail ends of the reverbs like this one. So the release on it comes down, whereas if that was just naturally just made up from a normal shelf like this one, if that was, say, like that all the time, you would just hear a lot of that top end, which you don't really want on the tails. So that's the reason I do that anyway. And I found it works really well. You can also do that with drums, or if you wanted to get more of spatial awareness, it's a bit like an imaging, a spreader, like the isotope one I showed you earlier in the thing. And then after that is just, we've got the limiter, which again just takes the peaks away. It's hardly reducing by much, but we'll have a look now. There we go. 3.1 reduction. I mean, that's probably it's just going to sort of square off the top end of the transients, which just probably makes it really harsh. Again, I could use the Soothe plugin for something like that, but I just, it's just the way I did it on this one. So, and then these bottom two were just, they were actually channels I forgot to take out because they weren't in the grouping. So it was just the donk. So I imported the channels just by going to the project itself and then dragging the two in, because I did notice at the end of the track there were some bits missing, and they were those. So next on the Mixdown, what I try and do is make sure you can see the levels are very different. So what I did was I matched the levels to how I thought they would sound, how I was happy with, and and by doing that I just went through, I just muted them, and then I started with the kick, the bass and the drums. So let's have a look at the area. So it was kind of like here. There we go. And then what I did was just brought the drums in. I've obviously done it to save time to show you, and I've made the track already. So, and then on my other screen above, I have two monitors, and I have this on the other monitor. So this is Flux. Let's have a look. I might have to go back to this and go to this. Just put the Flux is an analyzer, and what it does is it obviously analyzes, but if you put the sample grabber, which is where it takes the signal from, and it gives you all the information, and then it goes over to this window, and then if I put it onto that there, and then what I can do is see the project while it's playing. And the thing I'm looking for now on this is I'm looking for any sort of areas in the frequencies on here. I'm looking for anything that's going to stick up, maybe like the a clap, a snare there. Normally the common mid-range areas that I get problems with, but it's I've done it less and less by visual and more by audio now. By looking at it, I find that sometimes you can see something and you think it is good, it's helpful, but at the same time, like I noticed with the leads here, they're really spiking through the mix, but at the same time, to me, it sounds a lot better, and that's the effect I wanted. But if you were to visually mix it, it wouldn't be as as it wouldn't have that same sort of balance in the mix. So and then the bass line is there. So a lot of people ask me about the kick and the bass and how to get them right. And in my Kool-Aid tutorial, I actually went more in depth on that one about how to get them to work together, like I did in this one. But one thing I have done, I always do now, is I always correct it before I do the mix down. So I try and make sure I'm happy with everything before I do the mix, because then it just makes life a lot easier when you're doing this, and you also get a better final result. But if there is any, I can always, what I do is I tend to check on here the levels of each one. So I'll look at this and I can see up here that it's like minus 26 on the kick, and then I'll go to the and it's quite similar on that one, and that was just done through doing it by ear. I didn't really look. I've just noticed that that's they work together, because earlier on I made them sort of fit in the last arrangement. So yeah, and then that's just the introduction kick. I won't go through that because it's nothing special. Drums, lead stems. Let's put some of them in. So you can see, like here on the left here, this like Christmas tree thing. This is the imaging. So I just tend to look at this if there's anything, if there's any weird areas. So when I say weird areas, so say for example on the leads here, I'll go to these. So I can see down in the lower end, especially around 100 and 200 in this lead, that there's actually areas that I wouldn't want in probably my, let's have a look back to the other screen. We've already got we've got a stereo there. So what I'll do is I'll just bring that up slightly to maybe there. And then if we go back to it, I can see that the stereo imaging on the lower end of this audio now. So it's not as in this area. So when the bass and the kick and everything are all going on, you're just going to get more volume out of the final mix. Vocals the same. Let's have a look.
Getting high. Nobody's watching. Nobody's watching. Nobody's watching.
So again, you can see that it's gone in a triangular shape from here, and they call it like a Christmas tree because obviously it goes like that, and then your bass is mono, so you've got that shape of a Christmas tree. But this is again just a way to go through the whole, because you imagine on the other project there'd be sort of 8 or 9 strips, channel strips, and you'd be have to solo them and go through them. So it's quite good to just do it this way. Well, I find it is anyway. I find it better.
Getting high. Can you dance? Getting high. Getting high. Can you dance?
Again, you can see it if there's any spikes at the top. If there's anything, there might be some tones you want to take out surgically using the Pro Q3 or something. Any other preferred, you can use the multiband or the Soothe or anything like that. The effects stems, that's actually all the effects and the send and return effects, like the delays, the reverbs and everything else, but also the uprisers, the white noises and things like that, the crashes if there's. I've just noticed this one actually has the snare in it, which I wouldn't normally do, but I guess it makes sense because it's in the same tonal areas, especially with all the delays and reverbs and builds on it. So you can see that has an abrupt end there. I didn't do a fade on that one because I would have wanted a tiny silence just before that kicks in, so it gives it more of an impact.
Nobody's watching.
Like that. But yeah, I also do this because sometimes if your effect stems aren't spread enough, or if they're not wide enough and I want it wider while the rest of the mix is down the center, I sometimes put an imager on this, and then I make sure that the panning and everything's all working well with the rest of the elements. See, I can hear at the lower end there, there's some problematic sounds in this. I think it's this one. It might even be the one above. It's actually okay in this area of the track because there's no low end going on, because the kicks are slightly filtered and the bass is stopped and faded out. It's quite good to have those, weird bottom ends. And then the big leads just sit on top of everything else. Those just, the big leads, yeah, I've showed you those already. So then all together, it just comes together really. And then it's.
Can you dance? Getting high. Getting high. Can you dance? Getting high. Getting high. Can you dance? Getting high. Nobody's watching. Getting high.
So you probably noticed that it's going over digital clipping on here, but that's because what I sometimes do is, don't often do it, but if I'm feeling in the mood where I want to spend a long time, I'll sum all this out, I'll bus it all through my SSL desk. I've got a solid state logic Sigma and a Ferrofish A32, so I can send out sort of 32 channels to go down to a stereo sum. And I would sometimes do that for a pre-master, and I'll run it through some analog hardware. But a lot of the time, I tend not to until it's been 100% signed by a label, because you can spend, like a couple of hours getting that right, and then a label will come back and say, "Oh, we like it, but could you change, could you change this? Could you, maybe suggest these different things?" Which sometimes is sometimes actually better for the track, and sometimes worse, and I don't do it. But so that's kind of like how I do the Mixdown. As you can see, everything's very with me using lots of limiters and saturation, and everything's quite sort of, there's not a lot of transients in a lot of the sounds, so it sounds quite, you get like a nice flat sort of flat mix, but also the elements in it are quite, they poke through in their own ranges. So that's kind of like how I get it. And I always find the less is more with things like this. So how you build tracks like this, it's it doesn't seem like a lot, but once you put it all together, it kind of goes together. So next up, I'm going to show you how to do DJ master. I'm learning mastering. I've been learning for a while now, but I'm still, I think mastering's an art that you'll always learn, and new technology comes out. But the next video, I'm going to show you what I would do just to get my basic master so I can play it out in my sets.